Okay, the final case study that we looked at when we were studying tectonics was a case study of a tsunami, and the example that we looked at was the Tohoku Tsunami, which hit Japan, and specifically the Sendai region of Japan in 2011. The most likely way that you'll be examined on this in the summer is to be able to talk about the effects of this tectonic event and indeed the responses following it. Okay, so we've got our big wave here to help jog the memory about the tsunami. The tsunami is a huge wave, but it's worthwhile remembering that that tsunami wave is triggered actually by a huge earthquake which took place underneath the sea surface, which generated a huge pressure wave which led to the wave that then hit Japan. Actually, Japan was very well prepared for the actual earthquake and the tremors. It has very earthquake resistant buildings, it has good planning for that type of evacuation and emergency, but it was completely taken by surprise by this tsunami which led to the huge amount of damage. So in this case it was the Pacific plate subducting beneath the North American plate which caused the massive so that's the North American plate which caused the huge earthquake. Actually that earthquake measured 9.0 on the Richter scale, okay, which caused the huge pressure release that led to the tsunami wave hitting the coast of Japan. Okay, so as we've done with previous case studies in the tectonics unit, I actually recommend that you start thinking about your effects in terms of those which are primary and those which are secondary, so almost your short-term effects and your more long-term effects, the things that resulted immediately from the tsunami and those that actually occurred later as a knock-on impact. And when you start thinking about your responses, again, start thinking about your short-term and your long-term. So for that reason we can start dividing this into a grid where you've got 4 sections. Okay, so perhaps the biggest thing in terms of the effects was the number of deaths. Okay, so we can signify that by a gravestone here. So we've got our rest in peace. In fact, there were about 20,000 deaths as a result of that wave. So the huge wave, which was up to 40 meters in height, swept along that coastline. Remember, it's moving so fast you can't escape it, destroying buildings in its pathway, dislodging trees, cars, complete and utter destruction. In addition to those deaths, another primary effect was the huge amount of damage to buildings, and conservative estimates are that about 200,000 buildings were completely destroyed by the tsunami. As a result also of the tsunami, you had a huge loss of agricultural land, so that's supposed to be some agricultural plants, and you've got your animals here, and there was about 500 kilometers squared of agricultural land completely wiped out. Now obviously that's people's livelihoods. You've got the economic multiplier effect, their ability to feed themselves, so that is a huge economic impact of this tsunami, losing that agricultural land. In terms of the secondary impacts, well, you had about 1.5 million households immediately shut off from their water supply, which is a basic need for humans. You had about 4.5 million houses instantly lose their electricity as the power plants were taken out, and obviously that takes time to get back online. It's about their daily living, but also their ability to do industry and factories and businesses if you don't have your electricity. And then perhaps the biggest impact, and the one that got the most media coverage, was the nuclear meltdown of the Fukushima nuclear plant. So we'll signify that by the nuclear sign. So that's the nuclear sign. And there was a huge inundation. That nuclear plant was flooded with seawater, which led to the meltdown of the reactor and had to be shut down. And there's scientists are still in that nuclear reactor trying to clean it up. It could be decades before that area is inhabitable. Conservative estimates are there are 1,000 times higher levels of nuclear material than is safe. That's contaminated soil. They believe that nuclear waste has gone into the ocean, which has contaminated fish stocks, so you can't farm on that land, you can't eat fish that's taken from that sea. They've had to completely evacuate that area of all people, and it could, as I said, could be decades before people are allowed to return to that area because it's being cleaned up. Now obviously that cleanup costs millions of dollars to do as well, and requires specialist teams to come in and do that. Another impact you had was that you had aftershocks. Okay, after the initial earthquake of 9.0, you had aftershocks measuring upwards of 7.2 on the Richter scale, and that actually led to debris and landslides. Okay, so these are the rocks coming down, actually blocking the roads, which inhibited the relief efforts. Okay, and in some areas actually stocks of food, water and medical supplies ran very low because they couldn't get help to people because of the snow and the debris that was blocking those roads. As all this was going on, obviously concerns about Japan led to the stock markets actually tumbling. Okay, so the Japanese yen went down, and stock markets reacted very badly to that, and as a result of it Japan's debt actually rose as the relief efforts, because obviously all of this cost money, ran into the billions of pounds. Okay, so the Japanese economy suffered hugely. Now in terms of what happened in terms of responses, well obviously people in the immediate faced with this actually tried to get to the top of high buildings. That was a short-term response, and there's some actual footage of people trying to get to the top of buildings to get out of the way. You had about 100,000 Japanese soldiers. Okay, so we'll put that with a gun. So for that, Japanese soldiers who were mobilized by the Japanese government to help people, and they helped deliver water and medical supplies and blankets and tents to the people most in need. In fact, lots and lots of people had to stay temporarily in emergency shelters because their houses, as we said, 200,000 of them had been completely destroyed. You also had an international aid effort. Okay, so specialist search and rescue teams came in from all over the world to help with the Japanese efforts to find survivors, and some aid agencies also flew into the area to help people. In terms of the nuclear reactor, well obviously there had to be an exclusion zone, so people were evacuated. You weren't allowed to go anywhere near the reactor. There's an exclusion area of several kilometres set up around that nuclear reactor. People were forcibly removed from there to save themselves. Huge amounts of money have had to be spent on the reconstruction of buildings, rebuilding houses. Obviously you've got your roads and your infrastructure that need to be built. We could put a house here to help us remember that. So there was billions of dollars as a long-term response that needed to be invested. And also Japan went and improved its warning systems. So actually it's now got a much more advanced sea warning system, So this is a number of sensors in the ocean that can detect when the large waves are coming. So they've invested in a much more sensitive system to help them give themselves advance warning of when that tsunami wave is coming. And that is about it for the responses and this case study.